Hi everyone and welcome back to the Books Are Everywhere. It has been a minute since I did a wrap up. I definitely didn't do one for August. I think I did one for July that was very late. But I'm here and a reasonable time in October, fairly reasonable time, to be doing a wrap up for September. To be honest, I didn't read that much in September. I think I managed to just about read enough to pass the magical readathon that I was doing, although I was reading Frankenstein and that did end up going into October, so I was only doing the readathon for fun, and I'm sure that G from Book Roast would say the same, that it's okay that it ran into October, but I haven't actually logged that book. It's just in my head that I'm like, okay, I did it, I just did it late. But anyway, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books to talk to you about today. Yeah, only 7 books. But I'm still fairly happy with what I read. A lot's been happening in my life, so I've accepted that my reading might like kind of go down a bit. I'm trying to pick up the pace now, but it's fine. I've also just come back from holiday, so I didn't read that much while I was away. I haven't really had the chance to listen to audiobooks over the past week or so. So yeah, I'm aware that like my reading has dropped a little bit, but that's fine. There is also a chunky book in here. It's all good. But anyway, yeah, I have 7 books to talk about today. So let's get started. The first one is Dinner at the Night Library by Hika Harada, and translated by Philip Gabriel, who's the translator of the Travelling Cat Chronicles. Looking at my stack, I think every single book here actually was towards my magical readathon, TBR, which does not surprise me because that is entirely what I focused on during the month of September. But anyway, the first one is this book. This book is following a couple of characters, but it starts following a character who used to work at a bookshop, I think, and then they moved to, I think she moves to work at this night library where, basically is it only open at night, or is it the fact that they work at night? I can't remember. But anyway, the idea of this library is that they store books that are owned or written by people who have passed away, and then they like take on their collections. But it's the collections of famous authors, so people can come and visit the collections and like borrow from or read from the collection of like their favourite authors. But we're following kind of the collection of employees at this night library. I really liked the vibes of this. It has the very typical, I think it's called like healing fiction vibe of like a Japanese translated book. It's very heartwarming, it's quirky. I liked the concept, it was quite unique, and I liked some of the stories in here. It has that episodical feel that I think a lot of these like translated books have, and I did enjoy more parts, like some parts more than others. But I still enjoyed it overall. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, and thank you to Scribner for sending this proof my way. It is out now, it came out in September, so you can purchase this one. It came out on the 18th of September according to the back of the book. The next one I picked up was Wild is the Witch by Rachel Griffin, who is the author of The Nature of Witches. This one is a YA witchy book following a witch who has been through something kind of traumatic with her friend and with like being a witch and the identity that she has. She's working for her mom, or with her mom, in this kind of like a magical animal rescue place. She's working with a guy who doesn't really know about magic, doesn't know that she's a witch, seems to be quite adverse to magic, and like says some things that come across like he's really not a fan and not going to be like happy about the fact that she's a witch. But she ends up accidentally cursing him, and then they have to like travel together to try and break this curse. I liked this, I liked the concept, the audiobook was really good, I enjoyed listening to that, but I gotta say, I actually looked up whether I'd read this before because it felt so familiar to The Nature of Witches. Like I've looked it up and like, you know, they are different plots, but it's been years since I read The Nature of Witches, and this just felt so familiar to me because of reading that other book. I genuinely thought they were the same book for a short period of time. I don't think that's a good thing. yeah, this just felt, it wasn't, like, thinking about it, the plot is different, but with the witches, the main characters, and the way that they were kind of like hiding their magic, I feel like I remember that from The Nature of Witches as well. I definitely feel like reading this one was a reminder that it is too young for me, and I think I would feel the same if I reread The Nature of Witches now. Unfortunately, I don't think I would get as much out of that book as I did when I read it. I only read it a couple of years ago, I think, but there's obviously a bit of a difference, and I do read a lot more adult fiction now, so yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is probably not one that I'm going to hold on to for that long. I wouldn't be surprised if I unhaul this and The Nature of Witches at some point in the near future. I did give this one 3 stars. I still enjoyed it. I still liked the themes of it. I liked the atmosphere of it. It was a great time of year to read it, and as I said, the audiobook was really good. But I don't feel like I got as much out of this as I expected to, based on my experience of reading The Nature of Witches not that long ago. Then I read I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This book was excellent. This is probably the best book I read. Yeah, I would say it's the best book I read in September for sure. I really enjoyed reading this one. It's a post-dystopian, I think. Is that how it's, or yeah, I think it's post-dystopian book, that's what it's called, or like, it's kind of post-apocalyptic, but I think it's post-dystopian, and it's super interesting. It's only short. I think it was released in 84, if I remember. Oh no, it's 95 that it was released. But this one is following our main character, who lives in a world where we are like, yeah, this like post kind of dystopian world where her and a group of women are living underground, and they are kept in this kind of cage by a group of men. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that they escape. Yeah, I've just noticed, and like that is kind of mentioned in the synopsis, so I don't think it's really a spoiler, but it's basically following them as they explore like what is happening in the world outside of this cage. It was super interesting. It's written basically in one long piece of text, like there's not really chapter breaks, but once I got into this, like there's a couple of breaks, but they're I think really far apart. I found this super interesting concept. It's really quick, it's really addictive because you just want to know what's going to happen. I liked our main character, and I just found this very introspective, very interesting reflection on what's happening in this book and what would happen in this kind of post-dystopian world. Yeah, and I just, really fascinating story. I would definitely recommend it and urge people to read it, especially women. I have also lent this to somebody at work who really, I also lent this to a friend who really enjoyed it as well. So yeah, and somebody who I work with also read it and she really enjoyed it, so I would really recommend this one, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was nearly a 5, but not quite, and this is also translated by Roz Schwartz, or Ross Schwartz. I don't know what language it was translated from, actually. Does it say? Okay, so it was first published in France, so I imagine it was published in French, and then it was translated into English in, give me a year, 1997. It was published in the UK with the title The Mistress of Silence. I definitely think this is a great title for this book, and I really loved it. Okay, then I listened to another audiobook, and that was The House of Many Ways by Dianna Wynne Jones, which is the 3rd book in the Howl's Moving Castle series. This was interesting. I've now read all of the books in that series in quite quick succession over the course of like just a couple of months. They're all following different characters and different kind of concepts, but the characters from all of the books do kind of overlap. This one is following a character called Charmaine, who is looking after her great uncle's cottage while he's away, and then this kid like turns up and is like, I'm the apprentice for your uncle, and she's like, what? She doesn't know that this guy's going to arrive, but then they end up kind of living in this house together, and this house is a magical house, and there's also a magical stray dog that's there, and it ends up that there is a box of the king's most treasured documents involved, and an irritating clown of small blue creatures. And And then, so yeah, and then the main character Charmaine meets a sorceress named Sophie. And this one does involve like the characters from the other books. I enjoyed this one, but it was probably my least favourite of the series. I really liked the concept of the house, and I feel like the magic in here felt very familiar to the other books, and the way that Diana Wynne Jones writes, it's very whimsical. I think if you can, I've said this all along, if you can get into your head that this is like a fairy tale, you will enjoy these books. And I like the audiobooks a lot, so I really enjoyed listening to the audiobooks for all 3 of them, I think. I at least part listened to them in audio, I think all of them, if not the second and third books. But yeah, really liked the audio, really liked the house. I feel like the plot was kind of wild towards the end, to be honest. I can't really remember too much about what happened. And I definitely enjoyed the other 2 books more, but I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I then read Good Spirits by B.K. Borison. I have read the Lovelight Farm series by B.K. Borison and quite enjoyed them, and I know a friend of mine, Charlotte, absolutely loved this book when she read it. It is about to come out. It's due out on the 21st of October of this month. This one is following Harriet York, who has she's always like trying to please people, please her family. She's got these kind of expectations set on her and she's trying to please them, but she's also kind of stepped out to do her own thing. And then she's visited by the ghost of, is it the ghost of Christmas Past technically? Yeah. Who is Nolan Callahan. And he is basically there to haunt people before Christmas. So he is assigned this task before Christmas, so he has to like try and move Harriet on before Christmas Eve. He's usually there to kind of show people what they've done wrong and try and get them to improve, much like the original kind of Christmas Carol story. But Harriet feels like she's out of place. They both start to feel like this is kind of out of place and they don't really understand why they're tied to one another, and it turns into a Christmassy romance. I would say I didn't find this too like overly Christmassy, and I didn't mind reading it this time of year. I feel like it was more just cozy than Christmassy, and I actually really enjoyed reading it this time of year. I really enjoyed reading it. It was a very readable, very enjoyable, kind of addictive romance story. I do like B.K. Borison stories and romance. Yes, I feel like you have to suspend your disbelief a bit, especially because of the magical elements in this, but I did enjoy reading it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And then my chunky book for the month was World Reverence by Rebecca Ross, and I'm glad it came up in my Magical Readathon TBR because I needed to read it anyway. It came out mid-September, I believe, and I listened to the audiobook, so although I had a proof, I actually waited for this to come out and then listened to the audiobook because I listened to the audiobooks of Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows and really enjoyed them. So I thought I will carry on the tradition and read this one in audio format as well. I did enjoy this one, but definitely not as much as Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. In this one we follow a goddess who is called Matilda. She's born in the underworld, but she actually travels and carries messages throughout the realm. So you see her in the mortal realm and also in the underworld and in like the sky realm, whatever the hell that one was called. And she is also kind of tied to this mortal called Vincent. And he is like praying to a goddess, and that goddess is Matilda. So they have this kind of weird tie between them, this weird bond between them. I enjoyed this. I liked being back in the world of our characters in Divine Rivals, in Ruthless Vows, but I kind of went into this kind of knowing that this one wouldn't be for me quite as much. I'm not really one for historical, and actually Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows are historical. They are set kind of inspired by like a World War I setting, but I felt that they were quite grounded and down to earth, and I didn't feel like they were that far in the past. It was very relatable still, kind of had a timeless feeling. Whereas this is definitely, apparently it's inspired by medieval Scotland, and I could definitely see that. The atmosphere in here with kind of the castles and the rivers, and I don't know, it just had that feeling of like historical, medieval historical fantasy. I did still like it. I liked the romance. I liked the slow burn romance between these two, and that plotline intrigued me, and I liked following those as characters. But I didn't find the rest of the plot that entertaining, especially in comparison to the other two books. And this is very long. Like, the proof looks like a brick. The finished copy, I've seen it, and it's not actually as long. It doesn't look as long, so I don't know if this has bigger text. It has quite small text, actually, but I don't quite know what happened there. Maybe the paper's different, but anyway, I did feel like this was very long. The audiobook was like 24 hours or something. It's not as big as some other audiobooks I've read and listened to, but it's definitely a lot longer than a lot of the stuff I've been listening to recently. Mainly like the Dianna Wynne Jones books, which are kind of like 8 hours, and then like Wild as the Witch was like maybe 10, 12. So it did feel like it went on for quite a lot longer than some of the stuff that I've read recently, which makes sense, but I definitely kind of felt this a bit more. And I felt like some of it was maybe a bit unnecessary in comparison to the other books in the series, which I obviously can't help but compare this book to the other two books. But yeah, I did enjoy this. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I love Rebecca Ross's writing. I loved the backstory that we got to Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. I wouldn't say you need to read this before, like, I don't think you need to read the other two books before reading this. I think you could go into this kind of blind, but I definitely think part of the appeal of this is that it gives you the backstory for the other two books, and I really enjoyed that part of it. I enjoyed seeing that part of it. So yeah, overall 3.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you to HarperCollins for this proof, and actually also for Good Spirits. Thank you to them for both of those books. And then last but not least, we have Best Hex Ever by Nadia El-Fassi. This I really enjoyed. This one is another romance book. It's actually set around Halloween, and again we are following a witch. I did have a couple of witchy books in here, and some of this really reminded me of Good Spirits in the magical elements as well, and the way that the magic presented itself during physical romantic relationships. Very specific things that happened that actually kind of happened in both books. This one is following Dina, who is a kitchen witch, so she's a cafe owner in London. I liked that this one was set in the UK as well, and there were some places mentioned that I've been, including the Prince Charles Cinema in London. Shout out to the PCC. Love it there, and I love that it got a mention in this book. But anyway, Dina is she's using her magic. She's working in this cafe, and she uses her magic kind of to like create baked goods and things for the cafe. And Scott is a museum creator who has recently moved back to London. He's kind of been travelling around in his like field. He's moved back to London and is living alone and working in the National Gallery, I think. Can't remember now. And he goes into the cafe, and that's when him and Dina cross paths. And then they end up both going to a wedding of their respective friends, and realising that they actually both know the bride and groom, and they end up getting kind of stuck together in this wedding for a weekend. And you know what? This was so fun. It was great. I really loved this romance. I loved this book, like the atmosphere, the writing. I loved the way that the magic was introduced, both of their families. Covered some really important themes in here, but in a really gentle way. I've already pre-ordered the Illumicrate Afterlight edition of her other book that's just been announced, which I'm really excited for, because this was just a great vibe. It was a great time. It was kind of spicy in places. Yeah, I thought it was great fun. I really liked these characters. It was like, you know, not like my new favourite book or the best book I've ever read, but in terms of romance, I found this really addictive. I really enjoyed it. I love the magical elements, love the friendships in here. We do cover some like important themes. I think there's a kind of content warning in the front. Yeah, so being cheated on in a past relationship, loss of a family member, growing up in a group home, and coming out to family members later in life. Which all I feel like were handled with the care and grace that they deserved. And I really enjoyed that they were, I really liked that they were part of the story. I feel like the smut did get a little repetitive. I guess maybe I'm a bit picky, or I don't necessarily feel like I need that much kind of smut in my books. And this did get quite smutty in the way that they kind of started happening quite frequently later in the book, which is all good, you know, I'm here for it and I support them. But I do feel like it got slightly repetitive later on in the story. But anyway, overall, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I'm raving about it so much that maybe I should up that to 4.5. It was great. Okay, so that is all of the books that I read in September. As I said, I did start Frankenstein, and it's a weird one because I actually read Frankenstein, like, I started on 17th of September. I read more of it in time in September, but then more pages in the short start of October. So I don't really know where to count Frankenstein, but I'm leaving it for now. Actually, do I include it now? You know what? I'm going to include it now because my memories are more fresh in my head, and then I won't forget it so much. And it doesn't really matter which month it falls into. But yeah, I did also read Frankenstein. I read a ebook version of Frankenstein, and it was the Penguin, one of the modern Penguin Classics versions. There was so much that was not the story. I read 25% of that book and I was still at chapter 1. Like, all of the stuff, the preamble, the introduction, the notes on the text, I found it interesting, but also having not read the story before, really odd to go into it reading like all of this background to the text and about Mary Shelley and about the author and her background. It felt really odd to go into it like that. And then yeah, the book actually starts at like 25% through the ebook version and ends at 80%, and then there is so much at the end that's like references, notes on the literature that was used, quotations, differences between the 1818 text and the text I think that's included in that version, which was like maybe 1830, because I think she published 2 different versions during her lifetime. But anyway, yeah, I found there was a lot around the actual story. I quite liked the story. I definitely enjoyed it more than Dracula, which, you know, they're very different stories. I don't need to compare them, but as 2 classic vampire stories, if I am going to compare them, I enjoyed Frankenstein a lot more. I felt it was very interesting to read. I found the story, I'm not really going to talk about it like in terms of what actually happens. I think it's quite widely known that it's following somebody who creates a monster, and he is called Frankenstein. His surname's Frankenstein, so the monster is Frankenstein's monster. I've never actually watched a version of the book, like, and of the film or anything, so I did go into it fairly blind, other than the very basic knowledge. But yeah, I enjoyed how it let us as a reader think about and explore how we feel about the monster and how the monster learns from his environment, and also consider whether he's the villain or whether Frankenstein is the villain. I thought it brought up some really interesting kind of discussion points and thinking points, and I did find it quite gripping, and I liked the atmosphere of it, and I felt like when I was reading it I was quite engaged. So yeah, a lot that I really liked about Frankenstein. I did give it 3.5 stars in the end. I feel like some of it felt like it was going on for quite a while, especially considering it's not a long book in itself, it's not a long story. And I will say that the language is very typically quite flowery, but it works a little better because the book's short, but it is still quite descriptive where it doesn't really need to be. I will say I did still find it quite readable, but I also enjoyed that while I was reading it, for part of that time I was with my friend Mitchell because we were on holiday together, and he's read it. We read Dracula together and then we read Frankenstein separately, but it was interesting to talk to somebody about it who had read it in the past couple of years, because there were parts of the book that I might not necessarily have been thinking about. I was then talking to him about it. It kind of triggered me to think in more detail about what was actually happening, and made me consider the story a bit more, which I really enjoyed that about reading the book, about the experience of reading it. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Frankenstein. Not that I was planning on saying those today, but that is fine. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this video if you made it this far. I very much appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about what I read in September. Finally doing a monthly wrap up again. Anyway, I will see you some point in November with my monthly wrap up for October. Thanks for watching. Bye.